Welcome to the Old Man's Corner. Grab a cup of coffee and come on in. Today starts, it was about, I don't know, 10 years ago. Often I'd get up and go down to Island Park to the Timber Creek Reserve uh, Nature Center, which is right next to the park. Most of the time I would drive down there, and today I decided I had a little more gumption and get up and go, so I thought I'd walk down there and then walk around the trails down there in the nature center. Well, it was about 12 blocks down there. I always carried an old wooden staff for a walking stick. It's an old limb that I peeled all the bark off of and just used throughout the years. Well, got up, and it was one of those. It was one of the early fall days. It was one of those days where you get up and dress up a little bit, add a light jacket or something. And by the afternoon, you're shedding that jacket. So I was walking down there. It was a nice stroll down there. It was early in the morning. It was probably, I'd say close to about 9 or 10 when I got down there. And I was going in, and inside the nature center, there used to be an old creek there. Well, they had diverted the Timber Creek and built a dike on one side. So therefore, the Timber Creek that was inside the nature center was just dry bottoms, except for in a couple of spots it still had some water because when it rained it filled back up. So you had this swampy looking area. And then they had built little pathways, little walkways, little trails back in there. There were no vehicles allowed back in there, and there was no, you weren't allowed to have motorcycles or anything. It was just a walkway. I know a few neighborhood kids around there would maybe ride their bikes back in there. But it was a nice little walk back in there, and it was all wooded area, and it had those little hollowed out spots where there was a little water here and there, and there used to be an old low water bridge that had washed away, so part of the cement was still there. And you had some high banks there that dropped down about 10 feet to where the creek bottom used to be. So you had it was a nice little scenery. There's a lot of wildflowers growing in there, and birds are chirping. You see an occasional rabbit or something, and it was just a nice walk back in there. And it's where, when I was younger, it used to be called, when the creek was still there, there was a place we called Pete's Bend, where we used to go in there and swim in. Well, since they diverted the creek, that area was there, but there was no, the water wasn't in there. It wasn't there anymore. So I was walking back in there. So I walked down there, and I was walking back in there and just enjoying the sights and sounds of the little wooded area back there. Taking my time because I was in no big hurry. And after I'd walked down there for about 12 blocks down there, I was in no big hurry to walk back. So because I was walking around the area down there, the nature trail. So I was walking through there, and it had the smells of the early morning with the smell of the autumn leaves that are falling and all that. And it was just a beautiful day. It was kind of sunny. I was strolling through there and taking my time looking at things, and occasionally I'd take my camera and take pictures and things like that inside there. Well, I'd kind of walked through the most of it, and was on my way back out, and I heard a noise behind me. So I turned around, and there was this little boy standing there. And he didn't have a shirt on, didn't have any shoes on, but he had a little pair of shorts on. But he was very out of place. What's this little boy? He looked like he's maybe 4 or 5 years old. Now, did he wander over here and get lost in here? Because the park was right next down It's right across a little bridge there. The park was there. So I saw him. He was just standing there. So I walked up to him. I said, "Are you lost?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Were you over at the park?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, well, I think it's a little, you know, maybe we got to take you back over to the park to see if your folks were over there, so you'd be around there." Well, he said, "Okay." So we were walking back, and I walked across this little walk bridge that went from that side of where the Timber Creek area was over to back into Island Park. And in Island Park, they had built this playground area over there. And so I thought, well, maybe that's where he came from. Maybe he wandered away from there. And so we started walking over, and I noticed there wasn't anybody over there. There wasn't any cars, there wasn't any kids, there wasn't anything. So we got over there, and I thought, well, I said, were you down here with your mom and dad and those? And he said, no. I said, well, where do you come from? He didn't know. So I sat there for a few minutes, and I thought, well, maybe I better call the police because nobody showed up to pick him up, and there's nobody there. So I called the police station and told them, I said, I have a little, looks like 4 or 5 year old boy down here. He was back in the Timber Creek Reserve over there walking around, and I have him down here at Island Park, and there's nobody around. And so they said, well, okay, well, we'll send somebody down there. So we were there, so I went ahead and let him play in the playground area. I waited on the police to show up. Well, they showed up in about 4 or 5 minutes. They were there, and they got out, and he was standing there, and I was sitting there, and so I had to tell the story of, that I was walking through the nature trail over there, and he just happened to be there. So I thought maybe he'd gotten lost and then brought him back over here, but there was nobody here. So they were standing there asking me questions. Of course, they probably were a little leery of me since I had like this little hat that I've got on, and I was in overalls and a light jacket, and had this this staff, this old homemade staff with me. And so they asked me all the questions like, well, when did you come down here, and how did you get here, and how do you think he got here? And I said, I have no idea about how he got here. I walked down here, and I was going to walk back once I got through my walk. And about that time, you hear on the dispatch radio in the car that the lady had called and said that her son was missing, that she had laid down for a little bit, and evidently he walked out the front door. So then automatically kind of realized this must be the little boy. So they got the description and everything, and it was this little boy. Said the mom was hysterical because she didn't know where he went. Where he'd walked from was about 5 or 6 blocks away. He walked along the edge of the top of the dike, which was only about 5 or 6 blocks over from his house to that nature center. So he'd walked over there and then walked down into the nature center. So they had me wait there until the dad came and got him. And he said he thanked me, and the police just took my name and number and all that stuff, and said that they appreciated that. And so I was kind of worn out after that. I thought, well, and now I've got another about 10 or 12 blocks walk home. So I was walking home thinking, I got to thinking, this is one of the only mornings that I decided not to drive my car down there and park it and get out and walk. I had decided to walk all that distance. So if I hadn't walked, I wouldn't have been there at the time that young boy was in there to find him. So I do think God works in mysterious ways. And this young child, he could have fell in the water. He could have fell down one of those embankments and got hurt. But he was okay, and his folks were glad to get him back. So I think if you have any stories like this that they would be interested in, if you want to share something like that, just put down in the comments, because I do enjoy those stories. And you have a good day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.